was there the first night. The hall held 350 people. That was like on the licence. He had over 1,000 in the first night. It was like you was looking and you couldn't get down to the front of the hall. You had to go round the side and come in the escape thing to come
outside.
Yeah.
Almost like, you're talking about fiction, the fact that, there'd be these smoky environments packed full of people, flipping coins, picking out holes in bits of paper, massively lucrative. And this again is a place where Philip could, as a black person, a person who's clearly non-white, he could express himself fully. He could be a bingo caller, he could be flamboyant, he could dress well, he could buy a nice property. It was a way in which he could also continue a bit of that culture of ducking and diving, which he would have picked up from his youth, and he gets access to all sorts of glamorous members of the underworld.
But when I was at school, I think they must have been some of the hardest times of my life, because they all called me chocolate. Everybody was beating me up. So there was one fella in particular, and if you was caught fighting in the school, which I did often, the teacher come round and you had to put on some boxing gloves and go and box the fella you was having a fight with. And this fella gave me a right thrashing. So I fought him again the next time. He gave me another thrashing, and I fought him the third time and he gave me a thrashing, and I fought him the fourth time and I gave him a thrashing. He didn't want to know no more.
Right.
And none of the kids picked on me after that.
If we were eating a dish of bread and dripping, because we never had jam or butter, just dry bread, our house was the poorest house you could ever see. And then I never knew what baked potatoes were till the kid next door come out with one, eating one. And we used to have Neville's bread in the olden days, and it was like workhouse bread, wasn't it?
My first memories was when I was a wee boy, I must have been about 2, and I had a younger brother. And every morning I used to get up early in the morning, and on the table there used to be some bread, like fingers, which the person didn't like eating crusts, so he left them. So I used to go and eat them, and then I brought my brother down, and I said, "Al, eat some of them." And unbeknown to me, my dad was standing there, and when we looked up, said, "I caught you," telling him to do wrong. That's one point.
Did he?
Yeah.
Why is that?
And you were corrupted from that early, were you, Len?
No, I must have been about 3.
3, I was 2.
This was down in
Peacock
Street.
Thomas Brem-Wilson
Comes to Britain.
This man who came to London
Decided to go to the UK.
A black man in society
pre-Windrush period.
There's this whole misconception that people came here only on the Windrush ship.
standing on the steps of my great-granddad's church that he established in 1906. This is quite a strange feeling. He created the first Pentecostal church in Britain, and the building is still here. Thomas Brem-Wilson came from West Africa, the Gold Coast, as it was known then, which is Ghana, in 1901.
Thomas Brem-Wilson, he was a British subject. He was born in the British Gold Coast, and him travelling to the UK, yes, he was travelling from his community on the Cape Coast to London, but he was coming to a country and a culture that he was familiar with, because Cape Coast was part of the British Empire.
There were 9 diaries of his, actually, which had gold mines, lists of gold mines in them, but they didn't really make much sense. The things that did were maps. There were maps and what they called indentures. An indenture is the actual contract that Thomas had made with chiefs to purchase the land, and it had the amount. I think the Tuasi one had something like £50 on it, but it marked out, it said what the square meterage was. It was fathoms in those days, and where it was located. There would be thumbprints if chiefs either couldn't sign or didn't sign. So it was like, you know, it was a bona fide property deed.
Monday, 9th of January 1899. Bought pike, £1, 3 shillings and 6pence. Thursday, the 6th of April, started to Agambra village. Reached by bike. Wednesday, the 15th of March. I met with a bun chief. Consideration money for the 3 mines is £25 each.
What was the purpose of his journey to Britain in 1901?
I think he's looking for opportunities of commercial connections. I mean, he's essentially a commercial-minded man. He's looking around all the time how he can trade in this, how he can speculate on that. And sometimes he's successful.
He was good looking, wasn't he? 6 foot. Well, they've got pictures of him, haven't they? 6'1", good looking, fit. He sort of like got all these leases of land that he'd acquired, and decided. Oh, and he took some. That's it. They got gold off the land. They went and they dug tunnels. They used to dig sort of like a little hole, big enough for a man to go down. Send somebody down, say 10 or 15 feet, and they used to chip away and get some gold, like gold dust. It wasn't loads and loads of gold dust, but it was a lot. It was enough to finance his trip and to leave some money in Africa for his family. And these they were all marked on maps.
Brem-Wilson, who belonged to the educated elite, is a school teacher and probably a headmaster in a school. His handwriting is extraordinarily good. That doesn't surprise me. You've got 2 elites. You've got a traditional elite who are chiefs and who have earned money from commerce, but you've also got that group of people who have been educated in Britain, sometimes at school, sometimes at university, or studied law here. And indeed, some of them are people who studied law, studied medicine, and also got theological qualifications. So they've got a triple whammy of professional qualifications. I mean, these are fascinating people. And there was a great deal of interest in the Gold Coast in that period, in things like rubber and land and mining and so on. so that you could sell a good story perhaps to a potential investor. For a large part of the 19th century, up until about the 1880s, when you have that great imperial expanse, conquest of Africa in many ways, Africans were used in the administration, in the colonial system, but they were black, even under colonial rule. These are the collaborators, if you like. They've got their own agenda, and they're looking to how they can increase their control and their influence. After 1880, that begins to change, and you get a new breed of probably privately educated, white, arrogant young men who go off to West Africa.
Both in church and state.
They're imbued with racist ideas. They tend to be throwing their weight around. They discredit Africans. Familiar
Litany of nonsense. Wednesday, the 9th of October, SS Sokoto started from Sekondi to England with me.
It's a long journey.
13th of October, posted Joshua Hayford and Fred from Sierra Leone. Sokoto moved for Las Palmas.
And poor people used to book in steerage. They would head to town, no proper facilities. But Thomas, because he came from a wealthy family, came first class.
Wednesday the 16th, a passenger in the second class died of fever and was buried by the purser. 19th of October at Las Palmas. Sokoto started for Plymouth. 25th of October, arrived Plymouth by Sokoto about 6:30 p.m.
He's got some gold, he's got money, papers. You've got letters of administration, you've got letters of introduction. So he met lots of people. I suppose you'd call it networking.
It just grips me trying to imagine how Thomas Brem-Wilson would have taken his first steps in London. I mean, he's coming as a comparatively well-educated young man here in 1901, and he'd have had ideas about London, its place in the world, the centre of the empire. He suddenly has a lot of opportunities in terms of making money, but he's also got a lot of restrictions in terms of where he can go, how people think of him, how people experience him as a black man, as a black African. In 1901,
just to be a black man in society at that time and be a pastor, and we've seen the kind of opposition he received from society, but to still steer on in your faith and do that continuously is impressive. Just by reading through the material, you see that individual persona, the colors and the characters of that individual, and the impact that they had on their own family and the society they were part of. Let's not be part of mainstream, but let's challenge and do what we believe in. I kind of see that as, at least through the archival material, when I've seen it, you see it through the photographs, you see it through the diary books. There is definitely where they want to challenge mainstream society.
Friday, the 1st of November, seen Reverend Cantell, and he laid his hands upon me in the name of the Lord.
In Pentecostal churches, or oftentimes it's called charismatic worship, that worship that incorporates song and dance and people being overwhelmed with kind of spiritual awakening. It's something that is quite dominant in African churches and black churches in general. It's really interesting to think that this, the nucleus of that was with this man from the Cape Coast who came to London at the turn of the 20th century.
Sunday, the 3rd of November. I am received now in Zion Church, sat on the Lord's Supper.
He sees the light.
I was baptised at Caledonian Baths.
He becomes a Christian. I mean, not just a formal Wesleyan Methodist, but he's also captured by the ideas of Alexander Dowie. I think he may have had a genuine conversion experience, which turns him into a very faithful disciple. Dowie himself is Scottish, a congregational minister.
We used to go to the theatre. This lady came on, very petite, good look, singing and dancing, and it was Etty Cinders. Fell in love with her, and she must have fallen in love with him.
For Thomas to marry a white woman and a Jewish woman, remarkable.
It must have shocked her family as well as his. Well, they didn't want him to marry Minan because, like, it was a different religion. Well, it's like Jews don't marry Gentiles now, so in those days it was.
Laying on of hands,
Faith in Christ.
Pioneering Pentecostalism.
speaking in tongues,
Preaching on the street.
Thomas becoming a pastor,
He used to go to meetings where he would preach,
introduces in the flesh all of the elements of Pentecostalism.
laying on of hands.
Casting and binding of spirits, the energy, sheer noise level, managing to get a huge crowd of 400 to 500 around him, stopping the traffic.
And when he got took in with this religious thing, and all he thought of was religion, and he didn't participate in any of his businesses, Mum got the needle, which is only natural, really, I suppose. And that caused rows and rows and rows and rows.
Because he never had no money.
Give it all away, did he?
And he used to be a pastor to this church and then never took no wages. He said, no, I won't take no wages. God doesn't want me to take any wages. If God wants to look after me, he will supply me.
Yeah.
And that's what his philosophy was.
And wife and children starving. Thomas lost his money, got arrested many times, thrown into prison.
Etty in court says that he starved us of money.
It would have been very, very pressurising, particularly for Etty, a mother, not just physical, but mental health, under the most extraordinary circumstances, with her children suffering with all of the negative attention that her husband is bringing on the family, not to mention the physical violence as well. So, yeah, they were under a lot of pressure.
She decided to divorce him.
He's a pioneer in what he sets up in Britain. The chapel in Peckham is a pioneer piece of Pentecostalism.
And the job of a bingo caller is a performance, is another type of oratory tradition that perhaps he did get from his father. The idea of being able to speak in ways that people understand, that captivate people's attention, that get people excited, that build the spirit, that inspire people, that get them to spend more money and think that they can win.
Philip and Ray would have been faced on one hand by very limited experiences and opportunities to get ordinary work, particularly alongside white workers. However, there are these other areas which are there, such as, working on fairgrounds, boxing.
Now, when did you start boxing then?
Well, they had a fairground every year, didn't they? On Perry's farm. We were sitting out there one day, boxer come out of the shed. Flat nose, great big cauliflower ear. He said, any of you chaps ever fight? I said, no, not us, mate. No. He said, yeah, you should be able to have a fight. Great big bloke like you. I said, no, we can have a fight, but not the way you fight. Yeah. So he said, no, he said, but we don't hurt one another. He said, it's all moody. So I got in the ring with him, and we put up a wonderful show. Oh, he said, you want to come with us? When we pulled down, he said, just jump on the back. So when they pulled down, we just jumped on the back. Well, that's how we got started. He went away the first year.
My granddad performed in the theatre in the 1920s, and I've got him talking in interviews about working and interacting with the American performers.
So when did you start going around with your brother as a dancing and singing?
Well, actually, I was a dresser for
Blackbirds, wasn't it?
The Free Eddies in Blackbirds, yeah. And when they went on in the wings, I was watching them, and all of a sudden, I could do exactly what they were doing. Now, one of them got pneumonia, so I said to him, I know the routine. So he said, do you? So I said, yeah. So he said, look, struck up the band, and I was in with the Free Eddies. The Free Eddies are on tonight.
Where was that?
It was at London Pavilion. There was another fella called Will Garland, and he was getting up coloured shows, like Coloured Follies, Brown Birds, things like that. They was playing, packed houses and everything. See, so I went up and gave an audition. I'm down, I got the job. In one of the bits, I had to bite my mouth over, didn't I, see?
Opportunities to travel.
I used to get one or two crowd jobs, like, they wanted 250 coloured people. We all had to have grass dresses, skirts and things like that. It was freezing cold. Spears, and we all had to go down to this hut, throw the spears in, throw torches in there and burn them all up. I got undressed and I thought, it's so cold, isn't it? Freezing cold. And then they're arguing about... They're arguing about the pay. They all gone on strike. They want more money. Well, they got double the money, haven't they? We got our £8 afterwards. Yeah. It's cold.
That was a lot of money. That's over a week's wages, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Extras wages.
Being entertainers.
What name did you go under?
The Russian Rose.
So what did your act consist of?
Singing and dancing.
And Danny played the piano.
Yeah.
Did he sing as well?
Yeah, he's a good singer.
Yeah.
He used to sing Cab Calloway's numbers, didn't he?
Did he?
Minnie and the Moocher and all that. And I should do all that, what they do today, all that mic business.
There's a little song coming on.
It was down in Chinatown. All the coke is laid around. He was wet and cold and pale. He was looking for his frau. He was broken, all his junk run out. And if you don't know Minnie,
she's tall and she's skinny. Yeah, good numbers there, see?
So at the back end of the 50s, my granddad Philip started a bingo boom. He had the Mercedes car, he had the big house in Bromley. My mum worked for him, my dad worked for him.
He had a stall at Bellingham before the bingo. The police were moving him on every week and the fines were getting bigger and bigger. Well, in the end, they did get rid of him. No job, no money. He heard that the Rivoli Ballroom had one night when nothing was going on. It was a Wednesday night. I think he paid £25 for the night, which doesn't sound a lot now, but it was a lot then.
The fact being that by 1960, that's only 15 years after the end of World War II, And you think of the nature of the bingo hall. Why is it so popular? Because it's a place which is affordable, and it's a form of entertainment for people who are often living one on top of each other in horrible tenements, a form of poverty which is almost unimaginable to 21st century generations. And one of the ways they deal with it is by meeting in bingo halls. It's a money earner.
Card table.
Raffles.
One-armed bandits.
One-armed bandits.
One-armed bandits.
One-armed bandits. It was all cash.
Is that this is money. This is business. Is sometimes in money and business you forget the skin color.
So how did he get all his gear for the
The
prizes and
we used to go to this place called Poundy's. Used to go there and get like all the linen for prizes for raffle and that. Then somebody gave him the name of a wholesaler, like where you get a lot of linen cheaper than what he was paying. I think it was Johnny Bradbury's. So he took a visit round there, and he was very nice, Johnny Bradbury.
Because I mean, it's different to putting a bloke on a torture box, you know, it's just turning a handle and it's more or less a big joke sort of thing. But when you get hold of a pair of pliers and break a bloke's toes, you know, just sit there doing it, but you don't feel a banging thing. And that's when I knew I was going the other way then.
Well, my granddad, Philip Brem-Wilson, did get involved with South London gangsters, the Richardsons, because of his success, actually, at bingo at the Rivoli Ballroom. He used to source his bingo prizes at various warehouses in South London and East London. He went to one, had the name Bradbury. Suddenly, one day, he was served by one of the Richardsons. Hindsight, we know this is because they saw he was successful, they were after cash, and for people to extort. They groomed him, they lured him into a business opportunity.
Well, they think that they're film stars and they don't think that they're vile people. They're not normal people. Well, my dad didn't even know the Richardsons at that time. Heard of them, but wouldn't have known one if he'd have walked in and shook his hand. They saw he'd got all this cash. Every week he was going in with a wad of cash. And they said, "What'd you do?" "Well, we got the bingo." And they're going, "Oh, that's good." They said, "Well, we're trying to set up something, and if you want to be a partner," I think it was called the Common Market.
Common Market, importing, exporting, looking for business guys. Quite plausible. Other directors, they had my granddad.
My dad being like
a cheque signature.
Jack the lad.
They're setting him up.
Thought it was great. Like, let's get in, let's be a partner. So he kept on saying, "It's got to be straight because I've got a wife and 2 kids, you know, and they got families. It's got to be straight."
He put quite a lot of money in.
But then he'd found out that they weren't straight.
How did they get him involved? Because he's a smart man. He runs a business. He's not going to sign a document just like that. There had to be ways for them to entice him.
So they showed him that you're the director, you're the guy who's signing the checks, you're going to have an office up at Park Lane.
Where my dad went to the Richardson's yard to see them, and they had this guy strapped up in a chair, and they were pulling his teeth out, like with pliers. I mean, why my dad didn't come home and tell somebody, like, "I'm not going to be in business with them." I think it must have frightened him, because he probably thought they could be my teeth next.
Protection money.
And he would have seen it as a risk. So what was being exchanged? How was they trying to convince him? What was the deal?
He might not have wanted to do it, but they built up the pressure because they'd say, oh look, I'm putting £1,000 in, that's proof that it's a bona fide business and it's going to be good. They were taking him out to clubs and it was all quite glamorous. It seemed like the high life. So he did say yes.
Who had a club in Brockley was the first supplier of machines for Phil, and we regularly went to his club at Brockley. I learnt sometime later that most of his patrons were gangsters who carried guns. One of them, a charmer, Johnny Bradbury, gave me a gold lighter. In later years, he was tried for murder in South Africa. This was just before the Cray brothers shot in The Blind Beggar. Johnny Bradbury was a right-hand man for Charlie Richardson, and this was in a small way how Phil got involved with the Richardsons.
They used Mr. Bengo to commit fraud and launder.
The business proposition was long fraud.
It was Charlie Richardson's most successful long-firm fraud.
As well as being thugs, they were quite sophisticated business guys.
The scam was to order goods on false pretences by setting up a network of phony companies with forged references.
They would set up companies, get credit.
At first, they paid suppliers promptly to win their confidence.
Whether it fed his ego that Charles Richardson was a buddy, I don't know.
Then they made huge orders on credit.
They'd rack up the credit, so get a huge amount of goods.
After delivery,
then they go bust.
I worried over Phil getting too involved with the Richardson gang. As usual, he got bad-tempered with me. He was putty in their hands. He could not see it.
The street markets of South London were an ideal distribution network for the Richardsons gang.
Everyone wanted to give credit. As long as you paid your first lot, the credit just came in. You can go to any firm. We had leather goods, all kinds of things like that.
If you want to go case for the weekend, this is the most marvellous thing to take with you. Yes? No? £6, 216.
They gave him an office in Park Lane, and by now he was using a chequebook again. I don't know what went on in that office. As usual, he was signing all the cheques, all the goods were coming in, beautiful jewellery from abroad and going out again, and he never questioned it.
You're actually, acquiring a huge amount of goods that you're either selling on and you're making a lot of money. And this was called long fraud. The police called it long fraud.
To this day, I honestly don't know what went on in that office, and I only know it was closed and the law moved in. I don't even know if Phil was charged with fraud.
She should have thought, get Dad out of it because they're going to torture him next. And then in the end, that's what they threatened to do. You give evidence and you're dead. It cannot be more serious than that, can it?
I mean, there's no doubt about it. My granddad was caught in the web of the Richardsons, also known as the torture gang. So it was a business deal that he couldn't get out of because there was this horrendous threat of torture.
Were you feared? Yes.
I was in the bingo one night. This bloke came in and took me dad. And they found out that my dad was getting pulled in to give evidence against them. And he said, Charlie said, if you give evidence, you're dead. This was in the bingo hall. So it was like in the bar.
He also then had the police after him. They were going to get the Richardsons through the fraudulent activity. So Philip was really the pawn between these two organisations, and he had nowhere to go. If he did not testify in a court case against the Richardson gang, they were going to put Philip in prison. So that was the first thing he had to deal with. So he had to make a statement against the gang. Police corruption was rife during this period, and it's known that certain people couldn't get arrested.
Commanders at Scotland Yard, at one time there was lowly sergeants. If we didn't pay these people money, my customers had all kind of harassment. My premises were searched, and it's a strong form of blackmail, and it had to be paid. Everybody else paid the police off, every other metal merchant. If I didn't pay them off, I'd have been in a very vulnerable position.
You could do whatever you wanted, and you couldn't get arrested because you could pay off the police.
That was how it was. We just could not put a foot wrong. No matter what police station you went to, there was always someone that a local police station knew who could contact someone there and straighten the things out. We'd tell him what it was for, and he'd go and do the deal. He'd come back and say, all right, Johnny, £50 for me. They want £150. Just give him the money, and that was the last you ever heard of anything. As I said, you could not get arrested.
Philip's role with the police was complicated and twofold, because he was on the one hand involved with the fraudulent activity with the Richardsons. On the other hand, the police were investigating themselves. My granddad gave statements about things that he'd seen, torture, violence by the Richardsons. It also involved him seeing a member of the Richardsons give money to a policeman. And it's very interesting because through Freedom of Information papers, the names of the policemen and people involved are blacked out, so they're redacted to this day.
They would put it that they were a threat only to the underworld. But in reality, they're a threat to the public because they become power mad. They wouldn't hesitate to dish out violence. And the violence was such that it could only be a perverted mind that was doing it or controlling it. And it was bound to lead in the end, if it wasn't stopped, or if it hadn't already happened, it was bound to lead in the end to murder.
When I went into the yard, there were about 12 people outside. I didn't know them. They looked like scrap metal merchants. the office I saw Duval in a shirt sitting at a desk, covered in blood, mainly coming from a cut in his arm. Law was sitting in a chair. He was covered in blood. There was blood on the floor and on the walls. Charlie was sitting at another desk. What I had seen happen to Law and Duval was the worst sight I had seen. And I was physically sick.
Who's very confident, and that means it's either one of her two parents that gave her that space to be who she is. Because Nina called the shots in all of her life, if you see that, and from a young age, as a teenager as well. So which of her two parents influenced that? Could be the mother, could be the father.
Well, this is an incident at Mr. Smith's, which was in Catford.
I had my Givenchy coat on.
Right, what was that? The black coat?
Black Givenchy, you know it well, don't you?
Givenchy.
Givenchy.
Yeah, 3/4 length.
Yeah,
sleeve.
And satin tie belt.
Yeah.
And I was.
What about your shoes? What sort of shoes?
Very high heel patent shoes.
With pointy toes.
Pointy toes that scrunch your feet.
Mm.
And I had this black.
Mm.
And I had an umbrella and these quite new style long thin umbrellas.
Mm.
And it had a big red glass knob on the top.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I don't suppose it was real glass, but it was very thick. And everybody used to carry these. It was like a fashion thing.
Mm. Did it have a thing that you put on your shoulder?
Yes, a thing that you threw it over your shoulder with.
What would you drink?
I would drink a sort of baby sham.
Right.
It wasn't very intoxicating. Quite pleasant to drink.
Now the family always kind of, whenever they got together, it was always talk of Africa. You know, what's out there? Is there gold? But nobody ever did anything.
Now or never.
It was kind of like a bit of a myth. Which had lists of gold mines. In those days, there was no tourism in Ghana. Flights were so expensive, it wasn't a place that people were going. It's hard to understand that now. It's very expensive because it was all business class. The only people out there were business people.
A sign to go.
Nina's cousin Raymond was employing at the time a Ghanaian guy called Kofi. And he just happened to recognise the family maps. He recognised some of the places. So that was quite interesting. It was like, oh, okay, if we go out there, we've actually got someone who might be able to help us pinpoint, know where we're going. The first trip
was 1985.
This was my mother, Nina, her cousin Raymond, Den, my mum's partner, and Kofi. So he was the guide and interpreter. That was the Virgin trip.
What do you think was going on at the time that made her want to go to Africa? I mean, it's quite a leap, especially in the 80s.
Yeah. I think it was quite life-changing for her during the 80s. I mean, 1980, I know she divorced my father, so that was a big moment in her life. She'd had to set herself up with a new way of making money. So she'd started a stall in Deptford High Street. Now that must have been a challenge or a brave thing to do, because I don't remember seeing any females running a stall. Not the whole thing. I mean, she had the van, she got the goods, she was doing the lot. It was a very multicultural environment, which was unusual for her to be. It was a new thing. She found this stimulating because I think in her life so far she'd been like the odd one out. There was a huge amount of sexism. It was macho. She really had to stand her ground. She was good because she was very quick-witted, and I think she obviously inherited her dad's gift of the gab. That must have made her feel quite confident. She's bringing in her own money, and she had a new partner, so she must have been like in love. He travelled a bit. He was quite adventurous, so they must have spoken about Africa and this idea. She was looking at life in a different way. I think there was more space in her life.
Ghana has a very rich and long history of mining, and particularly gold mining. And therefore, it's not by coincidence that, the country used to be called Gold Coast.
Nina found a house that was called Wilson's house, which was Thomas's house, and this was at Cape Coast. It was a bit run down. There were people living in it, and goats and chickens, so it was occupied. Also, on the piece of land that was called Tuasi, she found her great aunt was living there. She was the Queen Mother. She knew Thomas, she remembered Thomas. She actually had a photograph, so that was quite a moment. She was very helpful because she had several nephews. One was called David and one was called Francis, and David took Nina and the gang to show them the full extent of the land, the boundaries, and he actually showed them to where he was digging holes and he was getting gold. He was digging out earth, and he had this very heavy stake that he was crushing all the earth with. And, his hands were like leather.
In the 17th century, mining was the basis of coinage in terms of currency, not only in West Africa and in Sub-Saharan Africa, but also in several European countries. So, for instance, it's estimated that about 224,000 pounds worth of gold was exported annually in the 17th century to the Netherlands for coinage purposes. And in Britain, I think in 1553, there is a captain by name Thomas Wyndham who sort of exported 10,000 pounds worth of gold to England. Right. So, in that sense, mining was so important in terms of giving so much wealth, but also power to the chiefs.
Anyway, when he crushed that, he put the crushed earth into a dish, and then he went to the stream and he washed it, panning, and gradually he kept swishing the water around, and the little particles of glittering pieces was gold. And then after he'd done this, he got a pipette of mercury, and that made the gold turn into a very small bead.
during Thomas Brem-Wilson's time, in the sense that probably he had his name on the licenses. And of course, being a native educated elite with some kind of adequate understanding of the cultural practices, having some local knowledge, probably may have helped him in striking a very good deal with the chiefs. Who knows, perhaps maybe the chiefs were related to him, or maybe he was friends with the chiefs. And so he must have gotten a very good or great deal.
So when Nina saw this for the first time, what was like a pipe dream and had been talked of, this was serious, this was the real stuff. And plus she knew it was on the land, how much was there? It kind of gave an impetus. Perhaps they could mine. Perhaps they could get they knew they couldn't do it themselves. That was the other thing. The sites and the land were vast. So it was the start of thinking, now maybe we've got something here.
I think small scale miners are always pathfinders for large scale mining companies. And so what foreign companies tend to do is that they look at where small scale miners are already operating, because that gives them a sense of how mineralized that particular land could be, and then they go to the government, get exploration rights over that part.
First off, she had to go to the government, register the land, her interest, and find out what to do. In Accra, massive colonial building, Minerals Department, Land Commission. It was like 1984, long corridors, rooms off of this department, maps department, people in different rooms doing, goodness knows what. So it was like quite an onslaught to begin with. The other thing was, there wasn't a woman in sight.
In the case of Ghana, in the 1970s, the military government at the time, under one gentleman called Colonel Kutu Echampong, passed a decree that allowed the government to take absolute ownership of foreign companies. Did a pretty bad job in terms of managing these mines. And so by the 1980s, the mines were so inefficient and they were almost at the point or the verge of collapse. So in pretty much of the 1980s, the presence of foreign companies in Ghana was quite limited. And so, coming across small-scale miners and then anticipating that there could be gold over there, and therefore getting in touch with the Broken Hills Australian company. What Nina saw in the 1980s, she saw right, she anticipated right, in the sense that, there could be gold underneath. And I think she did the right thing in terms of engaging with Broken Hills.
The other thing was, they were used to business people. And here comes a white lady, she was considered white in Africa, a white lady, a white person, a white lady, an ordinary person, and she's coming in asking questions, and I don't think they liked it. So she was up against it, but what she had to do was get the land surveyed again so that she could register it, they could map it all out, and everything would be updated. That was the first thing, to get surveyors involved. The heat was very overpowering, and it was a heat where you were just sweating all the time, which was very uncomfortable. At 6 o'clock it went dark every day. That's it, because it's on the equator. If you were doing business or anything, there was always a race to get everything done while you had light. There weren't any tourists out there, and I suppose in a way we looked like tourists, like white people. There weren't any other white people wandering around. People were quizzical as to what we were doing. The other aspect was travel, in that, the infrastructure, the roads were absolutely awful, potholes everywhere. They were dirt. The roads were dirt roads. I don't remember seeing a tarmac road. It was quite common, to have cars, abandoned along the roadside where they'd broken down as well, probably because of a pothole, or, the vehicles were old. In Africa, they mended things. They didn't, things weren't thrown away. So something would break down. They would go and get the part, but, going and getting the part might be like several days. So the vehicle was abandoned, and then someone would come and they'd get it going again. I mean, so all the vehicles were old. The other thing I remember was that fuel, it was extortionate for the locals. If you flagged down a taxi, he'd take you straight to the petrol station to fill up, because he didn't have the money to have the tank full enough to get you to where you wanted to go. The other thing was you took your life in your hands getting in a taxi. Absolutely dangerous on the roads. I mean, more than busy, it wasn't it being busy, it was just that it was so dangerous because the roads were potholes and they'd be swerving. It was protocol to meet up with the chiefs who were associated with the land. Either they said they were or they were, whichever way. But there was protocol as well to have this procedure called libation.
And I can speak particularly about Ghana. Tradition played a key role in pre-colonial times, through colonial times, till today. So that, even though our laws, minerals and mining regulations or laws suggest that every mineral underneath the land belongs to the state and it is held by the president on behalf of the republic and in trust for the people, the state also recognizes that, chiefs have some kind of control over land.
And that's where there was a meeting of the chief, and he brought all the elders in. So it was a set time. It was usually at the chief's palace, which ranged from a more plush building to a little room in a poorer village.
That is where the traditions, become very important, because some lands are considered to be sacred, right? In terms of being the abode or the if you like, the resting place of maybe some ancestors or some gods, etc., etc.
That's where Nina had to swear her intentions for the land.
So just because you have a license from the government does not give you, if you like, the social right or the traditional right to start mining without, going to perform all the necessary libation.
The oath was the libation, a hard drink, which was like a very strong spirit that was passed round the group of elders and then passed to my mum, Nina, and everybody had a sip, and it was like doing the contract, centuries old, and that's how she did business. So, that was remarkable.
Lost for money, for gold, or was there some emotional connection as well?
There was definitely an emotional connection. I think, to actually see the land, be walking on the land that Thomas had set foot on. There was the emotional thing as well, that there was gold there. That's very exciting. And then this increased when they brought a geologist on. Now, this was like an experienced geologist. He'd been all around the world. And then he was in this little stream and he was watching Francis do this panning, and it brought a lump to his throat when he saw the gold, a large amount. He was very emotional. The process was to have the maps that she had updated. She had to get permission to do anything from the Land Commission. She employed 2 surveyors from Accra. They both got malaria. Then we have the story of the 2 Menses. The first one came to a meeting in a village, rather inebriated, and it started upsetting everyone. Mensa number 2, he either wasn't here, he didn't turn up. He dragged the process out for about 8 months. Then he disappeared to the Ivory Coast. They eventually caught up with him. He had the maps, hurrah. They were of the wrong place. He'd done them of the wrong area. And he gave them like this massive bill. It was just like quite stressful. It's very difficult for individuals to get involved in such a massive undertaking like mining. I think it doesn't matter where you are. It's a bit like, you're just going into a completely different world, which they were, and a new business. And really, if you look around, these companies are the result of hundreds of years of investment and knowledge, and to think you're just coming along as a sort of a newcomer, to think that you could get involved and be successful and get your foot in is very naive. They had to get a company involved. They also had to put a bit of money in the pot because they knew they needed money for all the flights and expenses. They came back to England, told the family what was going on. Nobody was interested. Nobody wanted to put any money in. So, okay, it was Raymond and my mum were the main people because they had to set up a company. Then the job of finding a mining company, well, that was like, where'd you start? I mean, my mum and Dennis, they were market workers. Something weird happened. My nan was always interested in shares and she used to read the financial papers. Anyway, she was reading one day and there was this article about a company called BHP, which happened to be like one of the biggest mining companies in the world. They were Australian. They were looking for land in Africa. The Yellow Pages, which was a local free directory that you used to get in the post, my mum, Nina and Den looked in there and found a number for them, mining companies, and they were in there. Can you believe it? So they actually phoned this number and managed to get a meeting. So they got a mining company interested, and that set the ball rolling for this whole mining adventure. In 1987, when the mining company was interested, the next thing was that they sent geologists onto the land. A guy from South America, he was called Louis da Costa, he was first on the job. The exchange was very interesting because, bearing in mind, he was a pro. He'd been flying all over the world. He knew, what to do. He had his bag of, all these bits, his compass and whatever. And, if you think about it, this was an academic working alongside a market worker, essentially. She was savvy, but the combination was quite bizarre. And you can't believe how they hit it off. All he worked with was like business people, like suits. I think what was great as well, still remembering that there was a woman on board. All these activities were run by men. And you think Nina's in the thick of it and calling the shots. She's one of the blokes, really. Yeah, which was fantastic. It was her experience, which is great because it didn't get taken out of her hands in that respect. Not at this point. Nina and Den were totally intrigued by the whole procedure. They went on the land and they helped him take the samples, and Den got on the auger. They had to take various samples from different plots of the land to send them back to be assayed, which would show how the concentration of minerals, so that was gold, manganese, whatever. Nina became a familiar face at the Land Commission because they were in Accra and they kept having to do various bits of paperwork, and the land was way off, like in Tuasi, so there was this journeying all the time. And to make matters worse, they weren't very forthcoming with what Nina had to do. So she'd produce like this paperwork and they go, oh, you haven't done this at section 4, can you go away and get that done? So then that was like another journey. There would be a meeting and the person either wasn't there, it wasn't come back tomorrow, it was like come back in a couple of weeks. Nina had a 3-month visa, that was the maximum you could have. So there was always this like race against time, and if they were forced to stay out there longer, they had to go to, Western Union and wire them some dollars out for them to survive. So this was a constant scenario that was, on top of everything else. Once all the legwork had been done and money paid out, and there was a mining company interested, cousin Danny decided he wanted to be involved. Nina wasn't a fan. My dad actually wasn't too keen on him because he borrowed his tools and he never returned them. But he was determined, and he drew up a set of papers and he tried to get my granddad to sign them, which he didn't do. Next thing Danny did was he called a family meeting. This was in Deptford. This was at Deptford Snooker Hall. 7 people attended. There was myself, my mum, her dad, my great uncle, so his brother, cousin Raymond, cousin Danny, and cousin Danny brought his young son. He was about 10. So it was all men. Again, just 2 women. I was moral support for my mum. But before the meeting, my mum had said, look, to her dad, whatever you do, don't sign anything on the spot. And so, yeah, he said, no, of course not. It was like a macho atmosphere because there was quite a lot of niceties to begin with. It was tense, waiting for the moment when he was going to bring this paperwork out and ask my granddad to sign. He brought out the papers. Everybody was looking on. The pressure on my granddad was a lot, actually, and lo and behold, he signed. It was like this slow motion thing, and I was thinking, I'm sure he wasn't meant to sign that. He was a member, a director of the company that my mum had set up. It was my mum, 2 cousins, and we know 3's a crowd, and it's even worse if it's 2 men and 1 woman, and it's family. We know family and business don't often go together. My granddad, he did keep saying sorry afterwards, but too late, and the consequences were that Danny was a director now of this company, and he got up to shenanigans, should I say, is a good word. The end of 1987 now, a big blow came. I'm just trying to think. I think they'd just come back from Africa, actually. Because it was September, so they'd been to Africa in 88. Yeah. So 1988, my brother passed away, and
how old was he when he passed away?
Well, he was 27. So I don't think this is a good thing. I don't really want to be crying on camera.
No, let's not talk about it. It's no problem.
In this era, particularly in working class London, as nowhere else, the idea of being a businessman was a viable prospect. Unlike other working class areas in the UK, in London, you had to be able to look after yourself because you didn't have these big employers that were going to look after you from day one to death. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like a mining village where the only job was going down the pit and then coming out of the pit, and you did that until you got lung disease or you died, and that was it. London was different. People were in and out of work. They were in casual work in the docks, they were out of casual work, and the idea of being an independent trader, the idea of being self-sufficient, the idea of being a businessman was prominent and had gone back for centuries. You had this tradition, the language of business, the idea of doing the business. That was absolutely prominent in working class London. For someone like Philip to come along, and I'm a businessman, what you got? I'm going to run bingo halls. Away you go. There's nothing stopping him. No one's going to sneer at him. No one's going to say don't do it. There's lots of examples of other people doing it. It's the same with Charlie saying, I'm going to have a scrap metal yard. I'm going to have 2. I'm going to have 5 scrap metal yards. Why not? It's what independent, tough independent working class men aspired to. And Philip was part of that world.
The law knew that Phil did not have the brains to pull off a business coup as big as that. I must say that all his life he has been lucky. He seems to survive all setbacks and comes up smelling of scent. I think that this venture cost him roughly about £6,000.
There's a whole generation of British criminals, of London criminals, who experienced the bliss. And experienced the trauma of evacuation away from home. And that then had a big impact when you get into crime in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s. This was major trauma. It was not all sweetness and light. Far from it.
You got me concerned with the Common Market Merchants Company. They nicked about £1,000 off me. It looked like getting nicked out of it. See, what they was doing, they was opening up all these companies and when they left.
Working class London was always a hotbed of crime. The docks was casual work, so you were paid by the day, by the hour even. This was a hard life, a lot of ducking and diving, a lot of stealing from the docks, networks of stolen goods, and the war exacerbated all of that. Vital, if you were going to survive with your family, that you engaged in that black market. Some of those people who emerged providing those goods, whether they be thieves, whether they be spivs and black marketeers, went on in the 50s and 60s to be major figures in British crime.
Then came the day when the police had enough evidence to arrest the Richardsons, for most of the law was on their payroll. This was well known at Peckham, where their scrap yard was and all their dirty business was done, and as Phil was to be the law's chief witness. This was another period of terror for me.
Charlie had bought a company called the Northland Street Traders. It was decided to use this for the operation, renamed Common Market Merchants. It was a very good name. Charlie interested a magistrate from South London whom he had befriended.
The Crays were extortionists, pure and simple. The Richardsons, however, kept a low profile. They were far more businesslike, far more successful in terms of being money makers. The Richardsons had really close connections with the local police and were paying off the police. So were the Crays, but the Richardsons were smarter at it and had been doing it for longer. I think they were genuinely friends. I mean, Charlie didn't need to take him to places if he didn't enjoy his friendship. He was willing to do it. But he also knew that this was good for business as well. The investment that he got, it was £1,400. I think for someone like Charlie, there's only one colour, and that's green, and that's the colour of money. He saw someone who was good, someone who was sharp, someone who was making money.
His magistrate friend resigned from Common Market Merchants a few days later, on the 10th of January 1964. Charlie decided he would try and get Phil Wilson, a black man he knew, to put up some money in place of the magistrate. Wilson had made a name for himself in the south of London by running a very successful bingo hall called the Rivoli. All the old girls loved him. One of the reasons for his bingo's popularity was the generous prizes he gave away. Most of these were bought from the kind of wholesaling places that Charlie was now involved in. Wilson ran a highly successful business, and Charlie wanted to know all about it. Charlie, as he so easily could, showed his good side. Wilson, like many others, felt he was a perfectly reasonable man and a good businessman. The day after the magistrate cleared out of Common Markets, Duval and Charlie turned up at Wilson's place. Duval did most of the talking.
Jack Duval.
Yeah, you better have done me the most harm, Jack Duval.
But because he looked something that he wasn't when he first met him. He's got the Rolls Royce.
This fellow was mustard.
You saw Rolls Royces very rarely. And this guy was part of an international con exercise. And they're entertaining Dad. And he said to my mother, I could make him a rich woman. And they're only going to Savoy. That's right, they're going to all expensive places, aren't you?
Mm.
Yeah, he's International comment.
You need plausible comment to front up these long frauds. And for Charlie to do it well, for him to do it properly, he came into contact with a whole series of upper class con men, smart, suave, multilingual, contacts abroad. They knew their way around businesses, they knew their way around banks. And for Charlie, this was important, so he brought some of those people in. However, they were light-fingered, and one man in particular, a man called Jack Duval, actually conned Charlie. He was operating a fraud, and he operated a fraud within the fraud. Charlie set up offices in Park Lane, and he needed investors, and one of those investors was Philip Wilson. From the wholesalers to give us prizes. One day, apparently, Philip didn't have enough money to pay for the goods. Charlie loaned him the money. Philip paid him back the next day. Charlie started to take him around to nightclubs, to introduce him to people. We took him to boxing matches, and eventually he was asked to become an investor and a director of common markets. You know, was it legitimate? Was it not legitimate? In order to calm his suspicions about it, he was made a director. And he was given sole responsibility for signing cheques. One day Jack Duval went to him with a series of cheques that needed signing straight away. But they weren't made out to anyone. But Philip was persuaded to sign them. It was for wages, it was for transport, it was for this and that. And it needed to be done immediately because he was busy. So Jack Duval was a master con man, and he conned Philip into signing these cheques.
Just described to me about having the shotgun, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that you obviously, if you've got it, you've got to know how to
load it up quickly because it was very heavy.
Because I don't know how old I was. I was very young. I mean, I was frightened, and I remember I think discovering it in the because I always used to crawl about in your wardrobes and things.
Sneaky Mandy.
I used to go, as kids you go under the bed, you did in those days, and you go in. I used to go in all the cupboards and just sort of sit in there. I don't know what I was doing, but I remember coming across a firearm, thinking, "Oh, what's that?"
Yeah, your dad had
he had something else.
A pistol there as well.
Yeah, I think. So
I don't know where you got that from.
So would you say that Dad probably had more of an instinct about it being a bad situation, really?
I don't think he realised because
Terry, not your dad.
Yeah.
Terry did.
I'm not sure he did though, man, because it was only when my dad got the threat, because he might have been down the bingo hall when the bloke came in, and he's thinking, well, what's going to happen? It's not going to be just Phil. And he wasn't sure what my dad was going to do. You can't say, well, are you going to do it, Phil? You just have to do your own thing, don't you?
He signed these cheques, and Duval then cleaned out the bank account of Common Markets. It took about 20,000 all in all. When Philip found out that he found out because banks were contacting him, people were contacting him. He went to Charlie Richardson, first of all, but he also went to the fraud office at Holborn Police Station and told them as well that this had occurred.
The go-to name, this was my granddad because he was signing the cheques. This was Philip Brem-Wilson. So this is how it came back to my granddad. He was in cahoots with them, and this is who everyone came to and who the police would come to.
That comes from interview data that was derived from a journalist in the late 70s, early 80s. Interview data from Philip and from Charlie Richardson. So they agree on that. So there's nothing to suggest that Philip knew that he was involving himself with a long fraud. If he'd known that he was involving himself with a fraud and it had gone wrong, I don't believe he would have gone to the police, gone to Holborn Police Station. By this time, the British police were taking an interest in Charlie. Not the local police, not the London police, because a man had been beaten up by Charlie's guys at one of the scrap metal yards. He'd been beaten up badly, and he had gone to the police outside of London, went to a man called Gerald MacArthur. MacArthur started to take an interest in Charlie Richardson.
To this day, I honestly don't know what went on in that office, and I only know it was closed and the law moved in. I don't even know if Phil was charged with fraud. Then came the day when the police had enough evidence to arrest the Richardsons. So another period of living for me was a trauma. 2 uniformed police were posted outside our front, morning, noon and night. And all day we had 2 plainclothes detectives lived with us. I say lived with us because I provided all their food. So in all that period for the police was a cushy one. Phil got on well with them. I think he enjoyed it all. Made him feel notorious.
Charlie Richardson had a long history of witness intimidation. He'd done it before successfully, and when it came to the torture trial, he was going to do it again. It would have made absolute sense for Charlie to approach anyone, or to get people to approach anyone who was involved with the frauds, involved with the violence, and intimidate them and threaten them to tell them not to give evidence against the Richardsons. The police were so intent on making sure that Charlie in particular was put away for a considerable amount of time. They covered their odds. They covered all of their odds. By the time we get to trial, I think it's about a year after they were actually arrested, all of the cases that have been constructed around the frauds, they were ignored. They went for the violence. The police went for the violence. And this is the time when everyone read newspapers. And if you look at the front pages at the time, torture trial, torture trial, torture trial. This is what it was all about. Now, most ordinary members of the public had never heard of the Richardsons up to that point, but there was a certain salacious content to these stories about torture that really brought the Richardsons to prominence. They wanted Charlie put away, and they put him away for a quarter of a century.
The torture gang go down, Philip gets off, but the authorities have got it in for him. The newly formed Gamings Board get their teeth stuck in. Philip's bingo days are numbered.
You applied for gaming books?
Oh yeah. I applied for the gaming book, didn't I? 3 times, 3 years running. Give me a blank, didn't they? They said I was an associate of gangsters. Never had nothing against me. I was associated with gangsters. And I talked to my solicitor about it, and he said I could talk to council to see what they can do about it. And he said, well, you've got one chance. He said, something sin die or something, for taking away your living from you.
Freedom of information papers show the Met share intel, and it doesn't look good. Philip has a criminal record. Juvenile petty offences from 1928. The police don't regard Philip as a serious threat, can't see a reason to shut him down. Philip's been putting back into the community for 10 years.
But anyway, when I went to the appeal court, the 3 judges listened to me barrister, and they went, no. So I applied the next year, and
Stanley Raymond.
This was Stanley Raymond, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He said, we're not assured that you're not still associated with gangsters.
The Gamings Board have other ideas. Set up by Parliament, their agenda is to bring him down. Philip's loyal customers
come to his rescue. The bingo battlers throw everything at a press campaign to save their hero. The gaming's board decide Philip is
associated with gangsters.
And where are they? In prison.
So I said, if I could cut off my arm or cut off my leg and give it to you as a deposit that I wouldn't associate with them, I'd do that, willingly.
Still, Philip is singled out. The authorities determined to make an example of him.
But the answer is no. I thought myself, I've got no chance here with them.
The fight's over by 1970. Philip, guilty by association. Basically, after the Richardson's trial,
yeah, it was time. He had to leave the bingo because he couldn't get a licence. Can't believe his luck. Everything he touched then, he was unlucky.
On the way down?
Yes, on the way down, steep. Down, down, down.
Do you think your mother suffered in a way to do something exceptional because of their father and their grandfather? They'd all been successful in their own rights and actually pioneers as well.
It was just in their nature and in my mum's nature to try different things to survive and make a living. And they would be interesting things. I think she had this drive to achieve something. Well, one thing I didn't realise is the importance of my great-granddad.
Why was he a pioneer, David?
Well, he's a pioneer in that Pentecostalism. People are suddenly beginning to speak in tongues. Thomas refers to that in his diary. It's the first reference, the process of speaking in tongues. And it's huge. Absolutely huge.
Charismatic worship, people being overwhelmed with spiritual awakening. The nucleus of that was with this man from the Cape Coast.
We had a professor of modern history and he published a paper that said Thomas Brem-Wilson, pioneering Pentecostalist. So I thought, aha.
So he's a pioneer in what he sets up in Britain.
I have got a black relative been overlooked. He was someone important.
The pioneer on a piece of Pentecostal.
Pioneer, like his African father, Philip, made a mark. A black man in South London. In the 1950s, Philip laid the foundations of the game of bingo, leading the way for the massive social phenomenon that it became. A significant cultural contribution to one of Britain's biggest entertainment industries.